All right, today we're going to be talking about the text to send after a no response. Specifically, I'd like to actually create a protocol that everyone can basically follow if they're texting someone and that person gives them a no response. Now, when I say no response, I'm calling attention to the fact that you've sent a text, usually after a period of no contact, and the person you've sent it to has simply ignored it. Now, most of our clients freak out not knowing really how to handle it. We've had over a decade's worth of research on how to handle this situation, and we think abiding by this protocol is the best. Now, this might be a little bit more in depth than you're expecting because there's actually a lot of dynamics that go into play here, but the very first thing that you need to understand is understanding schedule and timing identification. So it goes without saying that a lot of our clients actually exhibit very anxious behaviors after the breakups with their exes. And this gets ramped up when they don't get a response from those exes. But one of the things that you need to realize is that the timing of when you send a text to your ex or to whoever you're talking to can make a big difference on if you're getting a response from them or not. You know, this is especially true if you sent a text that arrives when that person is busy with their schedule. So I actually took the liberty of taking a screen grab from one of our private Facebook support group members. This woman who's basically responding to a question with regards to how do you respond to an ex when they've got no response to all of your text messages before. And what I think is interesting about this screen grab is she makes a really excellent point. So here's what she says. I agree with the person who posted before. I'd like to say that I know my ex's schedule pretty well, but honestly, I don't sense breaking up. I basically know when he works and that's it. I wouldn't worry. Someone has waited over 13 hours before they've gotten a response. Hang in there. Keep your head up, girl. I'm rooting for you. Now, to give you some context, they're referring specifically to how long it took an ex to respond. In fact, one of the things that I've been harping on recently when it comes to sending text messages out in general is to not send them when you know the person you're sending them to is busy. It's almost always best to send a text message when you know or have an inkling that that person is alone. So really the first bit of advice or protocol help that I'm going to give you is if you have a no response from someone after you've sent them a text, don't panic. First, identify if they simply haven't responded yet because they are busy. Like I said, we notice most of our clients tend to have anxious tendencies, and those anxious tendencies mean they are not the most patient of individuals. Now, this begs an interesting question. How much time needs to go by before you actually begin to hit the panic button? And that's where the second step of our protocol comes into place. That's when the 48-hour rule comes into practice. Now, generally speaking, you're going to know pretty quickly if someone is giving you the cold shoulder, especially in a romantic situation. I'd say that if you've sent someone a text in a romantic situation, so let's say you've sent your ex a text and they haven't responded within 24 hours, it's usually unlikely that they'll be responding to you. Like, the chances of getting a response go down pretty dramatically. However, I'd actually like you to add an additional 24 hours to that count before you try anything meaningful. So that means that after 48 hours, if your ex hasn't responded to your text, you can officially claim that text as a quote-unquote no response and enter the next phase of the protocol. And like all the most important things in life, the next phase of the protocol has more to do with your mindset. Now, I really wish I could claim credit for this mentality, but it's actually, again, another comment I saw in response to the original question about an ex not responding to the text that gave me the idea. So here's what this woman said. She said, "It's best to treat him as a friend. If a friend ignores one message, what do you do? Sometimes you can even forget that you sent the message in the first place and remember it a few days later. Be natural." Now, this resonates with me really specifically because this is the exact direction a lot of my friendship texts go between my friends and I. So I'm going to give you a real life example. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine last night. His name is Simon. We were talking about art and writing. So I'm a writer, he's an artist. And he was talking about, I was basically just sort of gushing over how amazing I think his art skills are. And he was basically just saying like, I actually think writing is the ultimate form of creation. So we were having this sort of very philosophical talk. And he sends me 5 text messages back to back to back in the span of a minute. Now, I didn't respond to those texts for nearly 2 hours. And when I did, he basically didn't respond to me for nearly 2 hours. hours. Now, here's my point. At no point throughout the interaction, throughout the oh, he hasn't responded to me, did I freak out when I didn't hear from him. In fact, I wouldn't have even taken it personally if he hadn't responded at all. Sometimes an entire day can go by where we don't talk. Schedules get busy. It happens. So why is it that your ex would be any different? You're not with them anymore. You're broken up. You're exes. And you need to have this friend mentality when you get a no response from your ex. Don't try to force a round peg into a square hole by blowing up your ex's phone, trying to get them to respond. In fact, that's what the 48 hours is for. It protects you from yourself so that you aren't seeming overly anxious and blowing your ex's phone up when there's really no reason to do that. But that's where we enter the third phase of the protocol, and this is arguably the most important hinge point here. After 48 hours, you're going to send your second text attempt. So there's two things that I want to talk about here. Number one is what to do if your first text, the one that didn't get a response, didn't contain a good hook. And number two is what to do if your first text did contain a good hook. So let's take it from the top. What do you do if the first text that got a no response from your ex didn't contain a good hook? Now, one of the things that I've personally found interesting in an article I wrote was this formula of what makes a good first contact text message. And every good first contact text messages needs 3 elements. You need to make sure the text has a good hook. You need to make sure that it's based on your ex's interests. And then you need to make sure that the conversation has an open-ended question embedded into it. So it was basically taking a text message and saying, you know everything about AT drums. So right here, this is an interest and a hook. You're hooking your ex with an interest that they are interested in. Then I go on to continue. I actually need some help buying one. What would you recommend? So essentially, the interest, the hook, and then you have the open-ended question. Now, what's interesting about this, it just follows basic texting principles. There's nothing amazing about it, but you'd be surprised at how many people fail because they don't include these basic texting principles. So usually just doing that on your second attempt after a first no response text works out pretty well. But what happens if you already adhered to our method? You already followed basic structure. You have an interest, you have a hook, you have an open-ended question, and you still got a no response. So I'm going to let our very own Coach Anna handle it. So the following was a question we received in our private Facebook support group last month. It was this woman, she posted this thing into the group. She basically said, I've been trying to plan my third reach out after a second no response. One thing Coach Anna recommended is trying a low investment text. Does anyone have any examples of what that would look like? Turns out Coach Anna herself responded, and I'll let the master take it from here. She said, you don't expect a response from a low investment text. It's simply a visual of some kind. The purpose is to give you a break from coming up with high investment texts, utilizing an open-ended question and volleying his answer into a conversation. It also creates low-pressure environments for him. Of course, then the initial poster of the question responds, okay, so there's a short, funny TikTok video I've seen recently that I know would make him laugh. If I send something like that, I should expect a no response and then take 21 to 30 days to regroup and then try reaching out again? To which Coach Anna responds, a low investment text isn't included in the 3 no responses in a row count. Wait 2 weeks after the low investment text and then try to send your third. So here's the main point. If you've attempted a reach out using the 3 things in the formula more than 2 times, continuing to approach your ex in the same way isn't going to yield great results. So harkening back to Albert Einstein, he said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The low investment text is simply meant to be used as a soft reset to create a friendly environment, one in which a response isn't technically required. So, just to recap, the first thing you're going to do is not panic. Take stock of your ex's schedule and the timing of when you sent the text. Then you're going to wait 48 hours. If after 48 hours they haven't responded to you, you're going to come in with the vibe that you're treating them like a friend and begin to send your second text attempt. Now, the one case in which you shouldn't send the second attempt with our approach is if you've already done 2 attempts in the no response. And in that case, you're going to send a low investment text, which is a visual of some kind. A funny TikTok video is a good example, like that poster said. And then you're going to jump into what I call a mini no contact rule. Coach Anna really kind of spoiled the surprise in a write-up, but we aren't going to keep beating a dead horse here. If your ex isn't responding, we're going to keep we're not going to keep texting them over and over again the same way. We need to give them time. And believe it or not, this is actually kind of on brand for most of the exes we've observed in our practice. Recent polls in our Facebook group have proven this. And one of the things that we know about avoidant exes is that if you constantly push them, it can bring them back into the trauma of the relationship, causing them to further retreat away. Avoidant exes need a lot of space before they even consider having nostalgia about a past relationship. So a no response is a clear indication that your ex isn't comfortable talking to you yet, and that's fine. Give them exactly what they want for a spell. Our general protocol is to advise our clients to go into a 2-week mini no contact period and then trying again. Except, what happens after that 2 weeks if you attempt to reach out again and your ex doesn't respond? Well, in that case, you need to go into another no contact period, except add 1 week onto that. Just continue on like that until one of two things happens. Number one, your ex responds, or number two, you decide this just isn't worth pursuing anymore. The last thing I want you to do is pursuing an ex and wasting your time. If you get to a point where you're just like, you know what, this isn't worth it for me anymore, I don't really like doing this, I'm not really sure I want my ex back anymore, then we focus our energies onto moving on. And that's it.